c'est moi.
Allez, rugby. Allez, c'est l'esprit rugby, les gars.
I'm doubly happy to be with you today, and I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, chiefly Daniel Friedberg of Actors Publishing. I'm doubly happy, firstly because I could make the trip to Stockholm. 1 month ago, I was invited to a similar conference in Canada. To this day, I know this country only through its policemen. To this day, when I arrived, the police apprehended me as soon as I got off my plane. 1 hour later, I was on another plane back to France. 7 hours to go, 7 hours to come back, only to see policemen who not only speak French, but also are as unpleasant as ours. We'll all admit that it was not a great experience for me. So, the only fact that I could make it to this conference could at the same time be a good or bad news for you, my Swedish friends. The good news, if it means that your government judged I had the right to come to speak to you, and that freedom of speech and of expression are fundamental rights. A bad news if they are not even aware of the presence of an activist here, which doesn't bode well for your domestic security given to the current international threats. But enough with this kind of jokes. Thanks again for this kind invitation. I'm doubly happy also because my mother gave me Norman blood, just Viking blood, so we are in some way cousins. But anyway, since I consider that my family is Europe, I'm everywhere at home in Europe. From these 2 short videos that you've just seen, one shows the symbolic, for us as for the Muslims who built it, occupation of Poitiers Mosque and its consequences in the media. Poitiers is the city near which Charles Martel turned back the Arabo-Muslim invasion in 732. Historians in the Anglo-Saxon world talk about the Battle of Tours. Anyway, Poitiers and Tours are rather close to each other. This battle was important, not only for its result, but also symbolically, because Isidore of Seville used for the first time the word Europeans to refer to the coalesced Christians. The other video is more political, since it shows the storming of the French Socialist Party's roof, upon which our activists waved a white banner urging France's socialist president, François Hollande, to resign. This action happened the same day as the million-man demonstration against gay marriage and adoption in Paris. I don't really know what you heard of these events, but France has been shaken now for 6 months by an extraordinary mobilization against this law, mostly coming from the youth. A mobilization that gave way to a larger French Spring that some observers have compared to a kind of counter-May 68, which is true, at least for the values held by this youth. Far from contenting itself with a conservative or reactionary contestation, this mobilization led to true reflections on human ecology or on economic liberalism, especially regarding the commercialization of women's bodies with surrogate mothers. Quite naturally, the Identitarians I'm honored to represent today on the stage took part in this struggle, mostly with this kind of actions that are, in a way, our trademark. I should mention here that in this struggle, the youth faces a harsh and arbitrary repression from the socialist government. While I'm speaking, a young boy has been in a prison cell for 1 week, among murderers and rapists just because he refused to disband in the aftermath of a demonstration. Those 2 videos could have sufficed to explain who the Identitarians are. Throughout the organization of strong action, the use of the media, both mainstream and alternative, some of which we created and directly control, we want to spread our ideas, our concepts, and awaken the consciousness of our fellow countrymen. But if I stop here, you would think that it's most such a big deal, that it's even a little inserious. And you would be right. Like Charles Maurras, the old thinker of French nationalism, said, moving is not acting, and an action is only worth the ideas it bears. The gesture does not suffice. Action for the sake of action and aesthetics as an end in itself have long been one of the flaws of our family of thought. More on that later. This conference is titled Identity versus Globalism, and I have to say it is the very core of our political commitment. That could be illustrated by one of our own favorite slogans, anti-global, pro-local. What we are defending are, indeed, the deepest roots, those that never freeze, as Tolkien said. Our land, our accents, our dances, our landscape, our way of loving and dying, our identity against globalization, against the logic of the global village, which would like to erase all of that, to make everything the same. We are the defenders of diversity, of the world's polyphony, against standardization and its colorless and odorless magma. By defending the cause of our people, we are defending the cause of all the peoples of the world. When I reject immigration invasion in Nice, my homeland is southeastern France, I fight at the same time for the Tibetan or for the Indian from the Chiapas. It is the same logic of rupture with the lands and the borders that we are facing. And in front of those who see themselves as citizens of the world, we shout, one land, one people. One land, one people. The Identitarians were born in September 2002. Today, the movement exists mainly through Bloc Identitaire, which is our adult movement, and functions as a communitarian network with a political core, and Génération Identitaire, which is a youth and activist movement. Along these 2 movements, there is a web of local or thematic organizations, cultural organizations, sports clubs, social charities, community and identitarian houses, music bands, publishing groups, alternative news agencies, and local electoral campaigns, as does the movement I wrote in this. In September 2002, with our past experience on the radical right, or in parties of the national right, as well, for some of us, as experiences on the far left or in environmentalist movements, we created a new strain, based on a will to innovation, sometimes even to rupture with the methods and ideas of the French radical right, which, as too often in our minds, indulge in purely folkloric and caricatural methods. We then use the term of cultural revolution, a cultural revolution we wanted to wage in the field of ideas, and also, and maybe above all, in the field of aesthetics. It's around these 2 elements, ideas and aesthetics, that I will develop my speech so as to make you discover who we are. In the field of ideas first, I will try to explain some concepts and important ideas. The right for peoples to remain who they are. The 20th century was typified by the idea of the right for people to rule themselves. It is in the name of this right that decolonization took place. We think that the central question of the 21st century is the right for peoples to remain who they are. Against all imperialism, against mass population transfers, against global acculturation, this is a fundamental question. Thus, we expect, as any people has the right to expect. Maybe you noticed that it amazingly looks odd when it is a European people who expects this right, that everyone grants without question to any tribe in Congo. We expect the right to live in peace on our land, according to our identity with those who look like us. It seems obvious, doesn't it? It is, however, deeply revolutionary to stand for it today. Reality against ideology. The 20th century was that of ideologies. The 21st century will be that of identities and the violent return to reality. In the name of abstract ideas, man wanted to remake the world with all the tragedies we know. Today, it's indeed reality that is making a comeback. The question of energy, or rather energies, water supply, religions, ethnicities, nations. That is what determines and will more and more determine international relations in the decades to come, as well as the domestic policies of the states. It is not in the name of an identitarianism that would create a new absolute, leading to a new totalitarianism that we are standing today. But it is, on the contrary, in the name of a tangible reality, or carnal, concrete reality, in the name of who our ancestors were, of who we are, and of who we want our children to be. In the name, as a regretted Dominic Venner said, of what is not past, but of what doesn't pass away. Democracy against oligarchies. Democracy. That's a word for which many crimes are being carried out. This term has become a pretext to invite sovereign countries. In the name of democracy in our European nations, it is even possible to ban political parties, or even to forbid people from speaking or gathering, to preserve democracy. We say we are the real defenders of the real democracy in the pure European tradition. We even say with pride that we, Europeans, have invented democracy and are no doubt the only ones to be able to use it properly. Not only does that please us, but it also prevents us from any imperialistic temptation, from the pretense of going in people's lands to lecture them on how they should manage their domestic relations. We want to give a voice back to the people, a voice that has been denied to the people by all the oligarchies, media, political parties, trade unions, and financial powers. The ties between these various oligarchies are so blatant that they almost look incestuous. We advocate for a local, participative, direct democracy. When the people are consulted, it gives the rejection of minarets in Switzerland. It is, admittedly, a symbolic victory, but it clearly means to Muslims that Switzerland is not a Muslim land. That in this country they are not at home. No, are the Swiss an Islamophobic people, a different people? Well, if the same question was asked to the French tomorrow, the rejection of the minarets would be even stronger than in Switzerland. In France, 74% of the people in a recent survey consider that Islam is not compatible with their values. That's precisely for this very reason that our rulers refrain from asking them this question. Complementary identities. In France, Jacobinism, which stems from the French Revolution of 1789, has totally broken the link between the roots and the nation. Nations, since this, has been built as an abstraction. France being no longer the land and the dead, to quote the words of Maurice Barrès, but only an idea. The French are no longer rooted in a soil, a religion, a lineage, a craft, but are only undifferentiated citizens. This logic is the very matrix of globalism. There's only one step from the boneless French citizen to the rootless citizen of the world. We are in total rupture with this logic by asserting the precedence of identity and personal and collective fulfillment of man and the logic of complementary identities, family, neighborhood, city, region, nation, civilization, and also, in a transversal manner, sex, which is less and less obvious today, now that Sikh ideologues try to impose the gender theory and its absurd undifferentiation in school programs. And craft. All that defines us, molds us, commits us, and places us in a series of circles, habits, traditions, and codes. And that's what Jacobinism rejects, only wishing citizens whose only ties are with the state. Matrix of globalism, Jacobinism has also been that of all the 20th century's totalitarianisms. On the political level, I can affirm that my kinship to my little fatherland, my city and region of Nice, my historic nation, France, and my civilization, Europe, are fomenting that in France, and especially on the national right, is quite revolutionary. Even our familiar thought was contaminated by the Jacobin spirit, and thus, for many, particularly in Front National, saying that we come from a little local fatherland and that we are attached to our identity, and especially that we are proud of being Europeans, it will be hate in France for them. For us, we are French because we come from one of the French provinces. And because we are French, we are Europeans. Rootedness is crucial. It is both a standpoint and a balance. In France, petty nationalists, from which we have wanted to distance ourselves by defining ourselves differently, are no more attached to the state than to the nation. As a consequence, some nationalists go as far as surrendering to multiculturalism and becoming the fiercest defenders of assimilation, which, even if it were possible, but is it desirable, we think otherwise, with 10,000 or maybe even 100,000 non-Europeans in 60 million French people is an entirely different matter than 10 or 15 million non-Europeans, what is the case in France. It's not enough to sing the national anthem and dress up with the blue, white, red flag to be French. For us, the content is more important than the container. For us, the people is more important than the state construction. It is in the name of rootedness, in the name of identity, that we deeply resent the mass population transfers as tragedies. For the immigrants, as well as for the indigenous populations, it is because of crime, social and economic unrest they bring with them that we clearly want to reverse the immigration flows and start the process of re-migration, that is, back home process. Alter Europeans. I said that we consider ourselves to be Europeans. It's obvious. But the rejection of Europe by many stems from a confusion between the European Union and Europe as a civilization. We think that in our times of great geopolitical blocks, it is important that Europe has at last a strong and united voice to keep existing. But unification and standardization are not the same thing. That's the reason why, although we call for political construction on the continental scale, we can't, as Europeans of flesh and earth, recognize ourselves in this Brussels aberration. We, therefore, define ourselves as alter-Europeans, proponents of the construction of another political Europe. Neither the USA nor LA. Convinced Europeans, defenders of our identities and liberties, we can only be hostile to any imperialism trying to seize our lands. I'm talking here both about American imperialism and Islamic imperialism. While these two imperialisms are very different, we saw that one failed in the competition in using the other against Europe, which was clear in former Yugoslavia, when the USA favored the creation of Muslim enclaves in Bosnia and Kosovo to weaken Europe. Localism and protectionism. Lastly, we call for an economic protectionism against global free trade, as well as its indispensable and logical complement, localism. Localism is an approach combining ecology and economics and aims at relocating economic activities and thus men. Protectionism and localism can allow Europe, with a vast self-centered market, to find a way out of the dual domination established by the USA and China. I will soon talk about the aesthetic dimension of our commitment, but I will before that speak on the link between ideas and aesthetics, a certain philosophy, if not a mystic, that must lead us. This philosophy has three principles: the inner reconquista, the polar star, and the first line. Inner reconquista. We talk a great deal about reconquista or conquests in reference to the great Spanish reconquista, to talk about the days when we recover the absolute control of all our lands. But before considering that great reconquista, the first reconquista to fight for is our inner reconquest, the one that leads us from atomized and uprooted individuals to persons who have recovered the path of their ancestors. In one word, who are again able to become who they are. Know the self, as Socrates taught us. That must be one of our primary concerns. We can't remain in a pure posture or in a pure reaction. This confrontation to the other with a capital O must lead us to rediscover our me and therefore our us. The polar star. Our political mission is to stimulate our people, to be the compass of our people, like the polar star that shows the way. The first line, we must be in total rupture with the loser mentality, the cult of defeats and the dark romanticism. You know, it's this idea that the cause is all the more beautiful since it is a lost one. It's very appealing, aesthetically speaking, maybe sympathetic for a depressed novelist or a dark folk band. But in the realm of political action, it leads to disastrous behaviors. On the contrary, we must make ours the idea that we are not the last square, but the first line. The line that gets the most kicks, that's right. But first and foremost, the one that will open the way, that will prepare the intellectual ground and impose the battle site. It is the first line that often determines the outcome of the battle. It is the one that shouts and drags the other lines behind it. Let's talk now about aesthetics, maybe more quickly, since there's no need to complicate simple concepts. Aesthetics, that is to say, our way of acting on the tactic and strategic level. Scaring our enemies, not our grandmothers. For decades, we've seen activists indulge in the idea of being hated or scaring everyone, of being seen as bad guys and being glad of it. In these conditions, every provocation was worthwhile, every excess was legitimate. This mindset is close to the philosophy of the last square that I mentioned before. It's a one against all mentality, which leads the activist to think that the more he is detested, the more he is right. It's stupid and tragic when one wants to be involved in politics. We consider that since we fight for a strong ideal, we have no right to be weak. However, even if our enemies must know that we will never let them trample us, here I'm thinking in particular of leftists and gangs of immigrants who would like to assault us, our people have to see that this force is at their service, for their defense, frightening those we pretend to represent, those we pretend to defend, is the worst politics one can imagine. Walking on our two legs. There's a tendency in patriotic movements to separate activists and speakers, intellectuals and grassroots volunteers. We do our utmost to be as complete as possible. We follow this logic as far as we can in the way we see the struggle. Working on our two legs means that the political struggle and the intellectual or cultural or meta-political struggle must not be dissociated, let alone being seen as antagonistic. For it is logical to have specialized branches to be more efficient, and I'll get back to this point in a few minutes. Interactions must be constant. A think tank completely disconnected with concrete political action would have no interest. It would be simple ageism. Reversely, political action, if there's no concern for constantly renewing one's intellectual corpus to look for new paths, will soon fade into irrelevance. Either way, infertility is to be expected. The youth rules the youth. I mentioned the need for complete activism before. To get that, training is necessary. We think that the best training is action itself. It's why we have always defined our youth movement, Génération Identitaire, as a school of training through action. We train generations of young activists who give us every year new young leaders who become then new adult leaders. I, for one, underwent the same process, belonging to the first generation of our activists. The training is done through daily action in the local sections of Génération Identitaire, but also through the training session we organize during 1 week every summer, which is an essential moment of the movement's life for training as well as for inside cohesion. Beyond this aspect, what allows us to make new generations of leaders emerge is our constant concern for the autonomy of the youth, summed up in our motto, the youth rules the youth. We really don't want to become like those political parties which use their young militants only for managerial work. That's the reason why our youth movement is totally autonomous from Bloc Identitaire, with its own leaders, its own finances, its own agenda, etc. There's, of course, a strong collaboration between the two structures, but this principle of autonomy seems crucial to us. That's why you'll never hear us say that Génération Identitaire is the youth movement of Bloc Identitaire, which would imply the kind of hierarchy or domination. Rather, Génération Identitaire is a youth movement which works with Bloc Identitaire. Polymorphous resistance and the network logic. This will to autonomy of the structures which still work in close relation together is constant in our movement. We do think that we have to work in our fields and that we need specialized structures for that. Just as I mentioned earlier, the Identitarian movement is composed of Génération Identitaire and Bloc Identitaire, but also dozens of other structures like sports club, cultural organization, social charities, community and identitarian houses, music bands, publishing groups, and local electoral campaign. In our opinion, nothing should be neglected, and every person should be able to find a way to get involved. A person who would organize school support in the neighborhood identitarian house is an activist in the same way as a person putting posters on the wall or another one organizing a local concert. Lobbying. We need actions that can be compared to lobbying, mostly with our network of alternative media and our specialized organization. We apply these actions on the field so as to influence the public opinion, but also the media and the politicians. We were the first to bring the issues of Islamization or anti-white racism in the public debate, with particular actions, but also with more classical grassroots or political action. Our logic is not sectarian, nor even partisan, and we consider that if our motors or our fights end up being pirated by others, all the better. What matters is to move forward. We prefer to see ourselves as complementary to other organizations than as competitors. It strongly differentiates us from most other political parties, including the smallest splinter groups, which often confuse revolutionary struggle with fighting for their market shares. The street is our headquarters. Even if we conduct lobbying, for which internet is an important media, we don't neglect the streets, as our two videos showed you. We consider that we have to be present on the streets, that we have to be close to our people, that our people have to know us. There will be nothing worse than being known only for stickers displayed on the walls at night and dehumanized websites. The internet must serve as a tool to enhance our real action, but it mustn't replace it. Our struggles. We think that in a situation of an alternative and minority movement, we need to have visible, identified, and known storefronts to make ourselves known to the public opinion. We aim at establishing identitarian strongholds. It can be a city, a neighborhood, or even a school. My city of Nice is widely seen as a stronghold of the identitarian movement, since we have a solid and old presence there, and we have participated in local elections. Moreover, in this city, we have a territorial strategy. By choosing a sector where we are many to reside, we started shops, and we are also present in small local institutions. Counter-culture, counter-society, counter-power. By creating an appealing counter-culture, according to our codes and even our fashions, we work towards establishing a counter-society with our houses, our organization, our neighborhoods, and maybe in the future our own networks of food and our own school. This counter-society has to become a real counter-power on the national scale, which would be able to weigh on decision or at least to protect ourselves and our families against the worst ones. We are today assessing the results of our 10 first years of struggle. I tried to draw a large portrait of who we are, and will, after this, answer with pleasure all your questions about what I've mentioned, or about the Identitarian movement as a whole, France, or whatever you want. Thank you for listening. Thanks for my best.
Schedule, but there is time for a couple of brief questions. Please keep questions brief and in the point.
I would like to ask, what is the relation between Bloc Identitaire and the National Front, and the youth wing of National Front, and the young Identitarian movement in France?
It's kind of difficult to answer that. It's a classical question. It depends of people. It depends of people in National Front. You know, National Front is now a huge party with some sides inside, with some internal wars. So it really depends. As on a personal level, I can say I got good relations with Marine Le Pen, that, as you've seen in this little video, when we made the occupation of the mosque in Poitiers, as she defended us. She was the only one. And so I should say I got good relations with her, and I got a kind of face, relative face, it's politics, in her. It's more difficult with the old school, the old guard of the party around his father, that has some kind of old-fashioned nationalism. This is this kind of people I'm talking about that saw us as anti-France, because we say, okay, we got local roots, we are European, and for them it's like if we say we are for the European Union and we don't like France. That's not about it. So now in the National Front there is more different persons, more different lines, so it's difficult to say. But as organization, I should sadly say that we got no official links with National Front. At this time, for the local elections, in Nice, for example, we are trying to make an agreement with the National Front to rule the elections together, but I should say it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. On this point, what Marine Le Pen has said on TVs, on media, is that National Front could have people coming from the Identitarian movement on the list for the elections, but not as Identitarian people. So, it's like 50-50. And, well, that's what I can say. It's difficult to answer on a total level. There is some good elections and some points, bad other points.
I wanted to get your take on two things that I read. One was that if there was an election tomorrow in France, Marine Le Pen would win. European, is that true? And secondly, your take on, I also read that she was being prosecuted for some comments about Islamification.
So first, the second question about Islamization. In fact, after an action we made, because you know in France, we got a strategic thing from the Islamists that are praying in the streets. They are praying in the streets, like blocking the cars, everything, and making the prayer in the streets of our towns. And they say, okay, if you don't want us to do this anymore, let's give us some new mosques. That's a strategy that has been defined by the Muslim Brotherhood at an international level. And we made some actions about this, making some kinds of demonstration. And after this, the media asked Marine to say, what do you think about this? And Marine Le Pen said, she compares the occupation of the streets to the German occupation. She said, they are occupying our country, it's the same. And so there is a process for this. and we asked the European Union to give us the possibility to judge her in France. So, first question, second answer. Now, if they, at this time, in 2 surveys, Marine Le Pen arrived in the 2nd place, but nearly the first. But it's surveys at a particular time, because now the socialist government, after just 1 year, are something like less than 20% persons that are happy with them. But it's true, what is true is that Marine Le Pen is a popular person amongst the French citizens, even if they don't vote for National Front. She has around 40% people good appreciation of her. But sadly, I won't be minister, and I'm not sure she will win tomorrow.
Let's have one more question and then a longer break.
My choice.
Whichever you choose.
Do you have any connection, or would you like to have any cooperation with the Printemps Français?
Okay. Good question. The Printemps Français, French Spring, is not a movement. It is more an idea. There is a website, there is some actions, but it's not like a movement with the chief, the co-chief, the adjutant of the chief. It's not like this, and we are part of this. I personally was at the first meeting of the guys who launched this, so we have good, real links, and we took part on the actions, we took part on the definition of the ideological phase of the French Spring. Yes, we are really part of this.
That's a good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much.